Welcome to Ask Fear and Greed, where we take your questions and do our best to answer them. I'm Michael Thompson, and good afternoon, Adam Lang.
Oh, good afternoon, Michael.
Adam, I'm already smiling because today's question is just so far up your alley because it's all about data. And I can see that you are very, very, very keen to rip straight into it. The question comes from Jacob. He shared it via Instagram, and he says, question for Ask Fear and Greed if it fits. And yes, Jacob, it certainly does. He says, you talk quite a bit about consumer sentiment and business sentiment. How is it actually measured? He says, I get measuring something like how much we're spending or how much we're saving or how much businesses are investing because those are dollar values, but sentiment is how we feel. So how do they measure it? And who does the measuring?
So, Michael, I just jumped straight into this question, as you can imagine.
God, like a kid in a candy store. It's like like an atom in a data center.
Nice one, Jacob, and I'll be happy to give answering a shot. So measuring sentiment, whether it's consumer or business, is different, as you suggest, from tracking spending or investment. Instead of looking at dollar values, sentiment surveys like the Westpac Melbourne Institute Consumer Sentiment Index and the National Australia Bank Monthly Business Survey, they measure how people and businesses feel and they track that data over time. So for the Consumer Sentiment Index, Westpac and the Melbourne Institute survey around 1,200 households each month, asking questions about their views on the economy, their financial situation, and whether they think it's a good time to make major purchases. The responses are then aggregated and indexed with 100 points representing the neutral mark. Anything below that indicates pessimism, and anything above that shows optimism. The July data, the most recent data that we have, showed this index as 82.7, so consumers obviously felt gloomy.
So as soon as we nudge below 100 points, that's when Sean Aylmer starts referring to everyone as what's his favourite term? You're a miserable bunch, I think, is the way he has just generally attacked Australian society.
I love the way he says you.
Yeah.
He does. It's not very inclusive, is it? Everyone else is miserable.
Occasionally it'll be we're a miserable bunch, aren't we?
Yes.
And that's if he's feeling particularly kind of gloomy. But generally it's everyone else's fault.
So moving on to the National Australia Bank Monthly Business Survey, it works in a similar way. Each month it surveys around 400 businesses across a range of industries, asking about sales, profitability, employment, and their expectations for the future. And that feeds into the sentiment index. The long-run average index for the National Australia Bank Monthly Business Survey is typically around +6 index points. The July index number had this number at +1. So business sentiment is concerned. So these two surveys give us data about confidence in the economy, which can influence decisions on spending, investment and hiring. So while it's not dollars and cents, the measures of sentiment give us a good read on the economic mood. We get new data each month. So obviously stay tuned to Fear and Greed to keep track of it.
Adam, you know how at school, say, when students are given an assignment to do, and you can tell their enthusiasm for it by kind of how quickly they rush off to actually do it. And usually if the assignment is on something like poisonous snakes or shark attacks or serial killers or something, there is a great deal of enthusiasm. It feels like we just gave you the equivalent of an assignment on serial killers or something, asking you to go off and research data and how data is compiled and how surveys are done and how all the information is aggregated. It just feels like, I don't want to overstate it, but it feels like Jacob actually gave you a gift.
He did, didn't he? In fact, even though he didn't ask, he might even deserve a Mia mug, a most enthusiastic advocate mug, just for the great question.
Oh, gosh, you and your handing out of Mia mugs. You're as bad as Sean. The two of you between you nearly used up our entire first shipment of Mia mugs, but it is great to see them going to good homes. The Mia, the most enthusiastic advocate, is, of course, the award that we give to people who kind of spruik fear and greed to their friends, to their colleagues, to their family. And any excuse to send a mug out, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I tell you what, Jacob, if you spruik this on the social media machinery, you'll get a Mia mug.
Oh, there you go, Jacob. That's a pretty good offer. Thank you, Jacob, for the question. And thank you, Adam, for answering it so enthusiastically.
And comprehensively. Thank you, Michael.
Indeed. Remember, if you've got something that you would like to know, then please send your question through on Instagram like Jacob did, or perhaps on LinkedIn, Facebook, or at fearandgreed.com.au. I'm Michael Thompson, and this is Ask Fear and Greed.